Today on an all-new Dr. Phil.
When you were 3, she had you playing with knives, right? She was putting insulin in your milk. She force-fed you coins, right?
She'd hold me and make me eat them.
This is when you were 2.
I was barricaded inside a dog cage.
We're talking about a lot of children.
12, including myself.
Who the hell could do this to a child? Today's going to be a changing day in your life. You've never had anybody working harder to bring you to the threshold of change than right now. When you think of a mother, what words come to mind to describe her? Loving, caring, protector. But according to these court documents, Shauna was described as a pathological liar and a psychopath who created non-existent illnesses in her children and put them through medical workups such as lumbar punctures, endoscopies, and repeated blood draws that were painful and occasionally dangerous. Now, Shauna's children had been in the hospital so many times that her daughter's stuffed animals had multiple hospital tags up and down their arms, different dates, different hospitals. Shauna was even accused of putting insulin in her baby's bottles, but her daughter is not the only victim.
This morning, police say a woman knowingly poisoned a young girl, all for attention.
What she's accused of doing is known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
March of 2013, Shauna Taylor, a mother of 10, brought her baby to a Jacksonville hospital 3 times, claiming her newborn was having breathing problems. Several times.
This is video of Shauna Taylor. She gave her infant so many iron supplements that she damaged the child's liver.
According to the sheriff, he tried to bring charges against her multiple times after several child abuse investigations, but was never able to.
I believe Shauna is where she should be. The court took 1 year off for good behavior, but of course she was going to have good behavior because there was no children there.
When I saw the video of Shauna being prosecuted, I felt relieved and happy because she wasn't going to be on the streets.
Well, Josh and Amy say they were removed from their mother Shauna's care after she was diagnosed with factitious disorder imposed on another, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. But Shauna was not arrested until 15 years later, after they say she had 8 more children. I made a timeline of some of the emergency room visits, just some of Josh's visits. And what I want you to think about here, you know, Josh, you were taken in 96, and you would have been how old here in November of 96?
I would have just been born about 11 days prior.
Okay. Now, vomiting 3 days and possible dehydration. Now, the thing that you have to think about is what has a mother done to create the dehydration to take a child in, and then probable respiratory infection, fever, no bowel movement, then blood in stool. Now, what they will often do is they will get blood some way, either from the child or from themselves, put it in a stool sample, and take it to the hospital and say, here's what I've got. I've got a child, and here's a stool sample with blood in it. And so then, of course, the doctor tests this and says, well, okay, we've got blood in the stool. And so then you have tests for meningitis. Now, you were subjected to more than 1 lumbar puncture, right?
Yeah, I've had, to my knowledge, 2 spinal taps.
Yeah, and these are very painful. And they're also very dangerous.
Well, I still have recurring back pain in the location of the spinal tap.
Yeah, and particularly with a child, the tolerances are very, very low here. Then you present with a fever, then head injury, loss of consciousness. She would have you go out and throw bricks at one another.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on that. She dragged myself and my brother out into the backyard, and she encouraged him to throw bricks because she said it was fun. So a brick struck me in the back of the skull, and I just went to black. Woke up like about the next day with two about inch staples in my skull. And when it was time for the doctors to take him out, she tried convincing my father to remove him with a pair of pliers, and he refused, so she went ahead and took one out by herself.
With the pliers?
Yes, which tore at my scalp, and my father rushed me back and got the other one taken out, and it all stitched up.
And then, of course, you were just an infant, Annie, but here she reports sleepy, no appetite, and diarrhea. So you're subjected to blood cultures, a barium enema, then again diarrhea, then croup, vomiting and diarrhea, then you're dehydrated, hypoglycemia, and they find that it stabilizes when she's not present. And that's one of the things that becomes a very important diagnostic criteria, because when you're dealing with someone that is creating these illnesses, when you're dealing with factitious disorder imposed on another, and you take that person out of the equation, the child gets better. They stop having the symptoms, they stop having the problems because you've taken away the active problem. Well, Josh says his father claims he had no idea what Shauna was doing to her children. But did he really not have any idea? Did he not have suspicions? Well, we're going to find out next.
At the time that these poisonings occurred, I was working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. She was so good at manipulation. I would have to say that I was duped.
Amber's story was far from over.
Someone answered the phone and they uttered 3 words. She is dead. Click.
Amber's family says they do not believe that this was a suicide. They believe something much more sinister occurred.
Beautiful victim or killer wife. Mystery and murder. Analysis by Dr. Phil.
We got word from a guard that worked there that we better investigate.
Episodes 1 through 5 now available on Stitcher and Apple Podcasts.
All of this has affected me in a big way. I do have a bit of social anxiety, and I'm very untrusting now, and it's all because of Shauna. Now that I'm 18, I'm old enough to comprehend what she did. How could you do that to your own child?
Shauna destroyed my view on the world, and I have a hard time trusting people. I feel that because I'm offspring of Shauna, that I could have part of her mental status. If I were to lose everything, I just snap.
Everyone tells me to forgive and forget, but I can't forgive and forget.
Well, Annie and Josh say they do not understand how Shauna's ex-husband Bill did not suspect that Shauna was harming her children, making them sick. Bill says he had no idea.
I thought of Shauna as a good mother, but apparently it was just a show. At the time that these poisonings occurred, I had been out of the home already for 6 months, and I was working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. In 2000, they determined that I was type 2 diabetic. Even though Shauna and I and Nick were separated, she still took it upon herself to get my medications from the pharmacy. She was so good at manipulation. Looking back, I can see how 1 or 2 pills would be missing. I wouldn't know. On the several visits to the emergency room, I was scratching my head thinking, my gosh, how could all my kids have such severe medical issues? At the time, I thought she's a good mother for caring about the kids. I guess I was gullible. I believed people for their word. They caught Shauna on a weekend. 2001, I got a call from social services. That's when I got wind of kids were taken away into protective custody. I felt betrayed, and the courts said that because I was not aware of all the extensive testing on my children that I failed to protect my kids. And I felt destroyed, me being the good Christian father trying to make things right for the kids, and it just failed miserably. I would have to say that I was duped in a long line of people and professionals and therapists. I truly believe she belongs incarcerated the rest of her life.
Well, Bill is joining us today on Polycom. Bill, you've been listening and watching everything that we've been talking about so far, correct?
Yes, sir.
When you look at it with 20/20 hindsight, it's pretty overwhelming, correct?
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing that looking at it from this perspective and all the court reports, I just can't believe that I didn't catch up on it until after such terrible abuse.
You see these head injuries, foot injuries, hand injuries, all of these things happening over and over again. What did you think?
You know, at first I thought, how is it possible that my 3 young boys that seemed to be sick and ill for the first 6 months, and at that time I had no information in regards to how many emergency room visits. Apparently, while I was working, she would take the kids there and never say a word to me.
So when you separated, did you leave the children with her?
Absolutely, I left the children with her.
Now, you admit that there were times that you gave the children, you put chili peppers in the children's mouths, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was the reason for that?
The reason for that was my kids were eating so much soap because Shauna, the mother, would swear like a truck driver.
And how did you keep it in their mouths?
I would put it in their mouth with a teaspoon and they would spit it out. At the time, I thought that would be less toxic than soap. But it's funny, the reports don't state how many times mother had done that to the children, and all the accusations towards me, it made me look like the big monster.
Well, the court documents said you duct taped their mouths shut.
That's not correct whatsoever.
Who did duct tape their mouths?
According to my son Josh, he said his mother had put him in handcuffs. I'm not so sure about the duct tape.
In my opinion, there's a lot of misinformation in the court documents. For example, they said I was barricaded inside a bunk bed. That's not the case. I was barricaded inside of a dog cage.
A dog cage that was thrown around the room.
With my older brother. We were crammed in the same cage and chucked around the room by Shauna regularly. And she'd handcuff and duct tape us and leave us in a corner of a room. And the bunk bed was sabotaged, so it'd fall on myself, and it pinned me by the neck. And I was there for over an hour, and I was able to turn my head, seeing Shauna stand there, leaning against the wall, just with a smile on her face.
Bill, you never saw any of this.
I
No.
rarely remember him being home at all.
Well, Annie says she reconnected with Shauna when she was 15 years old. We're going to find out what Shauna told her aunt, and we're going to talk to someone who knows an awful lot about this disorder right after the break. Closed captioning provided by...
There's no expression in her face. She doesn't give a crap. She's just the person that gave birth to me. Honestly, I just ask why. I would like Dr. Phil's help getting closure.
And I would like to know what Dr. Phil would do if he was in a similar situation. I would like for him to help me to start trusting people more.
Josh said he has not seen his biological mother, Shauna, since he was removed from her care when he was 4 years old. But his sister Annie says she reconnected with Shauna when she was 15 and managed to develop a mother-daughter relationship until Shauna manipulated Annie into turning against her father and his family. I would like to add to the conversation Dr. Mark Feldman. Now, Dr. Feldman is an adjunct professor of psychology at the University of Alabama, and he is an international expert on factitious disorder and the related conditions. He's also written 5 books on the so-called medical deception. Dr. Feldman, it's good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you too. Thank you.
Let me start with this. Is this really a mental illness, or is this just really bad behavior?
Well, the American Psychiatric Association sort of straddles the fence. They say that it is a mental illness, but at the same time, they don't refer to these people as being patients. They refer to them as being perpetrators. Munchausen by proxy is a term that I tend to favor along with medical child abuse, because those are behaviors, and it makes it clear that regardless of how you view it as a form of mental illness or not, it is a potent form of abuse with a high mortality rate.
What makes a person like this do this kind of thing? What's their motivation? Are there common elements to these people? Because I'm looking at, there's an awful lot of mothers in this audience right now, and they're looking just in shock, like who the hell could do this to a child?
Yeah, it's stunning. I've been studying this for 30 years, and I still find it amazing that mothers whom we think of as being so nurturing and so caring can be transmogrified into evil people. It seems that most, if not all of them, have severe personality disorders, especially borderline personality and histrionic personality. And that simply means that they have long-term self-defeating ways of trying to get their needs met. Instead of asking for help, they engage in abusive behaviors. And being the parent of a terribly ill child gives them a very clear role in our society, and it also gives them the admiration of high-status professionals like doctors, nurses, and others. The whole community may rally around them. It's hard to imagine that a mother who comes across as being the ideal parent could in fact be an abuser. And so you see situations like Annie and Josh have gone through where there have been multiple red flags and warning signs over the years, and yet nobody seems to have done anything much about it. Doctors just prescribed more medicine and took the mother's reports at face value. And we see what the children have gone through as a result of that.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, of course, is they doctor hop. And then there's no way for former doctors to tell new doctors that they think this person was not a reliable historian.
So these cases slip through the cracks all the time.
Yeah. Now, Annie was just talking about the fact that she did reconnect with her mother, and you were saying one of the common elements to these people are personality disorders, often borderline personality or histrionic personality. And let's talk with Annie about what that means.
Personality disorders like borderline personality are long-lasting, chronic conditions for which we don't have consistently effective treatment. So instead, the person continues to act out. They typically don't want treatment, even if it's made available to them. And so the same behavioral patterns recur and recur and recur. And I think you, unfortunately, have been a victim of that and have seen that.
Now, Annie and Josh say they are concerned that the abuse they suffered as children may have some long-term negative effects on their health. I'm going to talk to them about that when we come back. Closed captioning provided by Well, Annie and Josh say they have social anxiety. They don't trust people. They're afraid they may end up like their mother, Shauna, who they say has this factitious disorder imposed on another, formerly known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and that's probably the best way to describe it. Dr. Feldman, this is not something that's transmitted genetically, correct?
Correct. And I don't think that Josh and Annie have to be concerned that they're bound to be perpetrators of Munchausen by proxy.
Dr. Feldman, we talk a lot about the perpetrators. Let's talk a little bit about the victims. What is the best course of treatment over the 30 years that you've seen for victims to recover? I'm certainly aware that body image and self-image tend to vary together, go up together, down together. It should not. If you have a good body image, that doesn't mean you should have a better self-image. If your body image is compromised, doesn't mean you should have a worse self-image. What have you seen over the last 30 years that is the best intervention for victims of these kind of perpetrators?
Well, they tend to not be congregated in particular geographic areas, but when they are, I think that face-to-face support groups can play a major role. Right now, there are some online support groups through Facebook and other mechanisms where survivors can talk about the strategies that have worked best for them. And in my new book, Dying to Be Ill, I also go through some of the strategies survivors have used. So there's a lot of hope as long as you recognize that the post-traumatic stress disorder can be a chronic ailment for which psychotherapy is needed. And people may also have a little trouble distinguishing between medical symptoms they experience that need medical treatment and those that don't. And some avoid doctors at all costs because it reminds them of the trauma they experienced as children.
And Josh, you say you're really kind of reluctant to go to the doctor.
Oh, I hate them. Going to the doctors, it just kind of reminds me of everything that happened, and just that negative feeling, the aura I get from being in the hospital. It's very off-putting.
And how did it affect you when you reconnected with Shauna and then she tried to victimize you yet again?
It hurt. I mean, I had the best relationship with my grandma and grandpa because I lived with them, since I was about 10 months old. Mm-hmm. And, they raised me. And the fact that she turned me against them, I mean, we don't have the relationship that we used to, and it hurts. Mm-hmm.
This all boils down to deciding who you want to run your life. And if you continue to be impacted by what she's done, then you're giving your power away to Shauna. I mean, what she did to you, you didn't deserve. You did nothing to bring it on. There's absolutely no accountability for either of you for what she did. But you have 100% accountability for what you do about it now.
Right.
And what you do about it now is you have to take your power back. She's made both of you where you're reluctant to trust other people, and that means that you've got unfinished emotional business. What I'm going to recommend is that you let me arrange for each of you to work with a hand-picked professional that understands this kind of trauma and that it can create post-traumatic issues, that it can create anxiety, it can create depression, it can create a sense of helplessness. And have those professionals work with you where you have a sense of self-determination and you heal those wounds so you don't have that unfinished emotional business, to help you close those gaps where you feel like you're back in control of your own life and that woman doesn't have influence over the way you feel.
I appreciate
And
that.
so I'm going to do that, and we're going to get you moving in the right direction, okay? All right. Fair enough. Dr. Feldman, a special thanks to you for sharing all of your 30 years of accumulated knowledge about this. And I want to tell people that you can pick up a copy of Dr. Feldman's book, Dying to Be Ill, at bookstores and online. And I'm also going to put a list of red flags and warning signs on drphil.com and on our Facebook that I've extracted from Dr. Feldman's writing over the years. So you can spot if you have someone in your life or your family that has this kind of maladjustment, because they do leave tracks. There are warning signs, and so I'm going to list those. So Dr. Feldman, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up, my next guest was bullied and ashamed because of her looks. But now she says no more. We'll hear her story next. Closed captioning provided by... My next guest, Ashley, says she has suffered with the skin disorder atopic dermatitis, the most common form of eczema, since she was a child. Now at 27, she says her disease has affected her personal and social life, as well as her self-esteem. Take a look.
I've had eczema all of my life. I grew up constantly scratching my skin and bleeding. I've had eczema on my face, my neck, arms, my back right now. It's everywhere. I was ashamed of my eczema. I have a love-hate relationship with mirrors. I didn't want to see how I looked because I already felt it. I got to a point where I said enough is enough. I was tired of being in pain. I had to confront my eczema. I call myself an eczema warrior because I've learned how to embrace it. Meditating, dieting, and yoga have been a life changer for me. I want people to know we're just as beautiful as any other person who has normal skin.
Well, Ashley is joining me along with our very good friend, Dr. Frida Lewis Hall. She's Chief Patient Officer of Pfizer, so welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Ashley, what has been the most difficult part of living with eczema your entire life?
Oh, yes. As a child, it was the bullying. I couldn't just go to school like any normal kid. And as an adult, I had a lot of insecurities and really figuring out who I was as a woman.
Dr. Frida, exactly what is eczema?
So first, let me dispel a couple of misconceptions about eczema. It's not just a rash. It is a chronic inflammatory skin disease that is actually rooted in the overreaction of the body's immune system. Over 30 million people in the U.S. suffer from some form of eczema, and about 18 million suffer with atopic dermatitis, which is a form that Ashley has. And it is not contagious.
Wow. So we have some pictures of a few of Ashley's recent flare-ups. Can you explain what happens during a typical flare-up?
Sure. So the skin becomes scaly, red, and dry. And in some cases, people may also experience oozing and crusted bumps. For some people, when the skin becomes dry and irritated, they experience intense itching. This can lead to scratching, enough so that the skin may break down or kind of tear and crack, and it bleeds. This intensifies or may intensify the flare and may lead to infection.
What is your experience?
I go through all of that. And as you mentioned, many people think that it's just a skin issue, that eczema is just a skin condition, when in fact, it's actually emotionally and mentally draining on an individual. And it wasn't until over the years of doing self-development work that I've really learned how to accept who I am and not allow the eczema to define me.
Okay. Is there a cure for eczema?
There is no cure for eczema yet. About 50% of people who are diagnosed with eczema in childhood will continue to have symptoms into adolescence and adulthood. And like Ashley, that means that patients are managing this over a lifetime.
All right, so for anybody that's suffering with eczema, what's the best way to manage it?
Yeah, so first of all, this may require a variety of strategies and approaches over time. So it's really important to work with your healthcare provider to discuss, to get a plan, and kind of update that plan. And the plan can include a whole range of things. And you mentioned triggers. So one of the things that often happens in plans is let's figure out what those triggers are and then learn to avoid them or manage them. They may also include preventive strategies, using fragrance-free moisturizers, making sure your skin is hydrated, ensuring that you're using gentle cleansers, avoiding strong detergents. And then we can't minimize the importance of dealing with the emotional side of this. And studies show that people who suffer with inflammatory skin diseases like eczema are more susceptible to mental health issues. So make sure that you're open and honest when you're talking to your doctor about any emotional challenges that you may be dealing with your eczema.
Now, there's a lot to know about eczema and living with the condition, and you can find much more information at gethealthystayhealthy.com, which is one of my favorite websites. It's an outstanding resource for any health-related issue, including eczema.
Yeah. And of course, while you're there, you can sign up for the monthly newsletter. Have information sent right to you.
Yeah, you'll love the website and you'll love the newsletter. It's gethealthystayhealthy.com. I want to thank all of my guests today, and a special thanks to Dr. Frida Lewis Hall. If you're in the Los Angeles area and you would like to be part of our audience, we'd love to see you here. The tickets are free. Just go to drphil.com, click on tickets. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram and check us out on Facebook. And be sure to subscribe to my podcast, Fill in the Blanks. It's free. I have in-depth conversations with people that you think you know, like celebrities and sports legends, but I also talk to ordinary people doing extraordinary things. These conversations, really, I have found to be fascinating and provocative, as well as entertaining. So join me at my podcast, Fill in the Blanks. We'll see you next time.